Ladies and gentlemen, queens and warriors, there comes a moment in every woman's life when love, once so sweet, turns bitter. You gave your time, your trust, your tears. You loved without condition. You built him up, supported his dreams, and gave him a heart that only asked to be held gently in return. There's a dangerous myth many of us are taught, often silently, sometimes loudly, that when someone leaves you, it's because you weren't enough. That if he breaks your heart, it must be because you weren't smart enough, sexy enough, supportive enough, or special enough to be loved properly. And so in the aftermath of heartbreak, we start turning inward, not in a healing way, but in a harmful one. We pick ourselves apart like puzzle pieces, trying to find the flaw that made someone walk away. But let me tell you the truth. His decision to mistreat you, abandon you, or deceive you is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of his limitations, not your value. You could have loved him with every fiber of your being, given him loyalty, honesty, and a safe place to land. And still, he could have chosen chaos over commitment. Why? Because a person cannot appreciate gold if they've been raised on glitter. A broken man will often shatter others just to feel whole. And if you cross paths with someone who didn't recognize your light, it's not because your light was dim, it's because he was too blind to see it or too insecure to stand beside it. Heartbreak often tricks us into becoming our own critics. We internalize rejection and start rewriting our identity around someone else's inability to love us. But what you must realize is this: you existed in full beauty and power before he ever entered the picture. His love or lack of it does not alter that. You are not a mirror to his opinions. You are a whole, breathing universe of complexity, kindness, and strength. No one departure can change that truth. Women are especially conditioned to believe that our value is tied to being chosen. We're told that being the one is the goal, that love validates us. So when love fails, it feels like we've failed. But you are not a failure for loving fully. You are not flawed for wanting someone to stay. In fact, it takes incredible courage to offer your heart to someone knowing they might not protect it. Your love was a gift, not a weakness. Never let heartbreak convince you that your capacity to love is a burden. That's your brilliance. Understand this: someone else's mistreatment of you is not proof that you are hard to love. It is proof that they were not capable of loving you in the way you deserved. There are people in this world who will walk away from diamonds because they're chasing pebbles. That is their lesson to learn, not your wound to carry. You don't need to be less of yourself to be loved more. You just need to give your heart to people who know what to do with it. The pain you feel right now is not a measurement of your worth. It's a scar from being brave enough to feel deeply. Yes, your heart is aching. Yes, you feel like you're not enough, but that feeling is a lie. Heartbreak whispers to distract you from your power. You are not weak because you're crying. You're strong because you cared. And though it may not feel like it now, the love you gave will come back to you. Maybe not from him, but from the world, from within, from new chapters waiting to be written. So when he breaks your heart, don't let that moment write your identity. Don't tattoo his mistakes onto your self-image. Don't let temporary pain redefine permanent value. You are still worthy. You are still whole. His absence doesn't subtract from your presence. His inability to love doesn't diminish your ability to shine. And just because someone didn't know how to love you doesn't mean you are unlovable. Closure is often romanticized as this final conversation, a neat emotional conclusion where everything suddenly makes sense. We imagine sitting across from the one who hurt us, finally receiving the answers, the apologies, the validation we've been aching for. We think if we can just understand why they did what they did, The pain will dissolve and we'll be able to move on in peace. But real life isn't a scripted drama. And more often than not, the person who shattered you is not capable of giving you the healing you deserve. They broke you not because you didn't matter, but because they didn't know how to value you. And that truth rarely changes in the final scene. The idea of closure becomes a trap. We put our healing on hold, waiting for someone else to come back and make it all make sense. But what if they never come back? Or worse, what if they come back only to confuse you more, lie again, or offer half answers that reopen every wound? Seeking closure from the person who hurt you is like asking the fire to rebuild the house it burned down. It sounds fair, but it's not realistic. And most importantly, it puts your emotional power in the hands of someone who's already shown they don't handle it with care. The truth is, closure doesn't come from a conversation. It comes from a decision to stop replaying the betrayal, a decision to stop waiting for them to say what they should have said when it mattered. Closure is the quiet, powerful moment when you decide that you're no longer going to let confusion control your peace. You don't need their words to move forward. You don't need their guilt to validate your grief. You don't need their version of the story to honor your experience. People who cause deep emotional harm often avoid accountability. They may deflect, minimize, or blame. And even when they do acknowledge the damage, their version of truth may be distorted by pride, guilt, or cowardice. When you seek closure from them, you're often opening yourself up to more hurt, not healing. You are offering them another chance to invalidate your pain. And for what? For an explanation that likely won't change anything? You already know enough to heal. You just don't believe that yet. We look for closure outside ourselves because the pain inside feels too heavy. But the answers you truly need are not in their mouth. They are in your memory, your instincts, and your emotions. You know when you were disrespected. You know when your trust was broken. You know when your needs were ignored. That's all the truth you need. Anything else is just detail. And detail won't patch up a broken soul. Only self-trust, self-compassion, and distance can do that. There's a powerful freedom in realizing that you don't need them to fix what they broke. That even without their apology, you can rebuild. That even without their insight, you can grow. You don't need to wait for them to speak the right words. You need to speak your own truth to yourself. They hurt me, I didn't deserve it, and I refuse to let that pain dictate the rest of my story. That's your closure. That's your starting point. And no one can take that away. So stop chasing people for peace when they are the reason you lost it. You are not a courtroom, and they are not the judge of your healing. You are allowed to move on without permission. You are allowed to close the door even if they never knock again. Let them live in the silence they created. Let their absence speak louder than any apology ever could. Because in the end, the strongest closure is not found in their words, it's found in your strength. When we talk about breaking his ego, it's easy to mistake that for revenge. You picture the angry text, the cutting comebacks, the public post meant to sting, but none of that touches his ego. Not really, because a bruised ego doesn't feel pain the way a heart does. It thrives on attention, even if it's negative. It feeds on drama, on your reaction, on knowing it still has power over your emotions. So the real way to break a man's ego, a man who chose to break your heart, is to rise above him so far he can't even reach the version of you he once had access to. You don't break his ego by playing the same games. You break it by stepping completely out of the arena. Silence is louder than shouting. Distance is more powerful than dragging him through the mud. Because when you disengage, when you stop responding, when you go ghost, not to manipulate, but to protect your peace, he feels it. He starts to notice that he no longer lives rent-free in your mind, that you're no longer waiting on a message, crafting replies, or losing sleep over what he's doing. There's nothing more damaging to a self-absorbed ego than being forgotten. When he realizes you no longer speak his name, that you no longer need him to validate your beauty, your intelligence, or your worth, that's when the sting begins. Because ego craves relevance. And when you take away your emotional energy, your attention, your fire, it's like taking oxygen away from a flame. His ego suffocates, not from hate, but from your healing. Let your growth be the loudest message you send. Work on yourself so deeply, so relentlessly, that the person you become is someone he never even had the chance to meet today. Not because you're pretending to be better, but because you actually are better, stronger, clearer, more whole. Let him see you thrive without needing to shout about it. Let him scroll through your progress, your peace, your glow up, and realize he's no longer part of the narrative. That's not revenge, that's evolution. Some people only recognize your worth when it's no longer available to them, and by then it's too late. The door isn't just closed, it's been replaced. The woman standing in front of the world now isn't bitter. She's better. Not in a look what you lost kind of way, but in the look what I found in myself kind of way. And no matter how bruised his ego becomes, he can't rebuild what he broke with your new, unshakable sense of self. That's how you break the cycle, not by retaliating, but by rising. Rising above doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means learning from it. It means refusing to stay stuck in the narrative of pain. It means choosing your next chapter with clarity instead of continuing a toxic loop with chaos. When you rise above, you don't suppress your emotions, you channel them into boundaries, into goals, into a version of yourself that no longer entertains what disrespects your soul. You become the woman who doesn't settle, doesn't chase, and doesn't explain her absence. You become unavailable to anything that ever made you question your worth. So when people ask you what you did after he broke your heart, you don't need a dramatic story. You can simply say, I rose. I rose so high that his ego couldn't follow. I stopped screaming and started glowing. I stopped reacting and started rebuilding. And the most powerful thing I ever did wasn't to hurt him, it was to heal me. Heartbreak is a form of emotional death. It's the burial of a future you once believed in, the end of shared dreams, the collapse of comfort. And in that grief, it's easy to feel like you've lost everything. But hidden beneath the wreckage is an unexpected opportunity, the chance to rebuild not just who you were, but who you were always meant to become. Heartbreak, though painful, is one of life's most ruthless teachers. It forces you to confront truths you may have ignored. It reveals strengths you didn't know you had, and it strips away illusions so you can begin again, this time with clarity. When someone breaks you, you have two choices: stay shattered or turn those broken pieces into a mosaic of something stronger. You may not have asked for the pain, but now that it's here, let it serve a purpose. Let it light a fire inside you, not one of bitterness, but of boldness. Let it be the fuel that drives your transformation. Use it as proof that you're still alive, still capable of death, and still standing. Because if your heart can survive that kind of hurt, imagine what the rest of you can survive. People don't talk enough about the raw power that lies in the aftermath of heartbreak. There is a moment, often quiet, often private, when something in you decides, I can't stay here. That decision is sacred. It's not loud or glamorous. Doesn't come with applause, but it's the beginning of elevation. is when you stop asking why it happened and start asking what you're going to do with it. That moment, that shift is where your rise begins. To start choosing yourself in ways you never did before. You pour energy into healing, into rediscovering what makes you feel alive. You go deeper with your goals. You remove distractions. You stop shrinking yourself to be more digestible to people who never deserved your flavor in the first place. You begin to build a life so rich in purpose, self-respect, and peace that the pain starts to shrink, not because it no longer matters, but because you've grown beyond the space where it can control you. Heartbreak can be the greatest reset button life hands you. Brutal, but effective. It peels away the unnecessary. It reveals where you are settling. It forces you to confront your patterns. And in that confrontation, you begin to reclaim your power. You start saying no more. No more to disrespect, no more to half love, no more to pouring into others while abandoning yourself. You start saying yes to solitude, to boundaries, to rediscovering who you are without someone else's hands around your heart. As painful as it is, heartbreak clears the path. It removes what was never solid. It burns down the illusions so you can finally see the truth about them, about yourself, and about what you truly want. And once you start walking in that truth, something incredible happens. You begin to evolve, not overnight, not without setbacks, but piece by piece you rise. You become soft in some places, harder in others, and wiser in all. And the next version of you, she doesn't need anyone to complete her. She completes herself. So instead of letting heartbreak destroy you, let it refine you. Let it be the reason you finally started taking yourself seriously. Let it be the reason you leveled up in silence, healed in private, and reintroduce yourself to the world as someone who no longer begs to be chosen. Because the goal isn't to get back at him. The goal is to get back to you. And nothing fuels a comeback like the kind of pain that almost made you forget who you were. There is a deep temptation after heartbreak to retaliate, to show him what he lost, to clap back, expose the truth, call him out, or make him feel even a fraction of the pain you're carrying. That temptation is natural. You are hurt, betrayed, humiliated, and your emotions want justice. They want him to feel as small as he made you feel. But retaliation is noisy, it's reactive. It keeps your energy tethered to him, which means he still controls your emotional temperature. Real power doesn't scream, it simply walks away. And when you choose indifference over retaliation, that silence becomes the loudest message you could ever send. Indifference is not the absence of emotion, it's the mastery of it. It means you've reached a level where his actions no longer move you, where his name doesn't cause your stomach to twist, where you don't need him to validate your pain because you've already healed enough to know it was real. Retaliation is about him. Indifference is about you. It's a declaration that you no longer need to prove a point, win the argument, or have the last word. You are done not just with him, but with the chaos that came with him. When you retaliate, you keep the door cracked open. You stay emotionally available, even if it's through anger. You're still engaging in the dance of dysfunction, but indifference slams the door shut. It says, this chapter is closed, and I won't waste another sentence on it. That kind of silence makes insecure people panic, because when someone expects a reaction and gets nothing instead, they're left alone with the echo of their own guilt. You don't have to curse his name. Your peace is punishment enough. There's something deeply unsettling to the ego when it is no longer relevant. When your glow up doesn't mention him, when your smile isn't laced with bitterness, when your progress happens without needing him to see it. He might expect you to post cryptic quotes, throw shade, or seek revenge. But when you choose to live your life with zero reference to him, he realizes he has no place in your present or your future. And that realization, that's the bruise to his ego he never saw coming. Indifference isn't weakness, it's evolution. It means you've outgrown the need for petty battles. You've chosen elevation over entanglement. You've decided your energy is too precious to be spent on someone who proved they couldn't handle it. It takes maturity to respond with grace when all you want to do is lash out. It takes real strength to say nothing when you have every reason to scream. But that kind of discipline isn't just admirable, it's unforgettable. It's important to remember that people often remember how you didn't react more than how you did. When you rise without resistance, when you succeed without spite, when you move on without malice, you leave behind a silence that speaks volumes, not just to him, but to the world, and more importantly, to yourself. That's when you know the healing is real, not performative, not for show, but deeply rooted. Because once you become indifferent, nothing they do can shake you. They've lost access to your emotions, and that's the greatest form of closure. So when you feel the urge to react, pause. Ask yourself, who benefits from this energy? Who gains power from your anger? Retaliation might feel good in the moment, but it never brings peace. Indifference, though, it builds empires. It keeps your hands clean and your heart clear. Because when you stop engaging with dysfunction, you start building a life that dysfunction can no longer touch. When someone breaks your heart, they don't just damage your emotions, they attempt to rewrite your story. Suddenly, you're no longer the main character in your own life. You become the one who was left, the one who wasn't enough, the one who was lied to or replaced. The narrative shifts from your truth to their version of it. And if you're not careful, you begin to believe it. You start to identify with the hurt, wear the betrayal like a name tag, and speak about yourself as if you are defined by that one painful chapter. But you are not the story they told. You are the story you choose to reclaim. Reclaiming your narrative is not about pretending the pain didn't happen. It's about refusing to let it become your identity. Yes, you were hurt. Yes, you were deceived, but that's not where the story ends, and it's not where your worth begins. You are more than the heartbreak, more than the silence that followed, more than the text left unread and the promises left broken. You are the author of what comes next, and you don't owe anyone the courtesy of staying stuck in the version of yourself they created. You must take back your story from the hands of the one who mishandled it, because if you don't, you will keep rereading the same pages, stuck in the loop of what went wrong. Reclaiming your narrative means shifting the focus from him, what he did, what he said, what he failed to do, to you. Who you are, who you're becoming, what you deserve. It's standing in the truth of your experience while also stepping into the power of your healing. It's saying, yes, this happened to me, but it will not define me. Too often, women are taught to narrate themselves through the lens of who loved them and who left them. We're told our stories are only compelling if they revolve around a man. But the truth is, your story was powerful before he entered it, and it will be even more powerful after he's gone. Reclaiming your narrative means telling your story from the inside out, not from the outside in. It means honoring your voice, your choices, your resilience, not just the chapters where you were hurt, but the ones where you rose, learned, and rebuilt. The most dangerous lie heartbreak tells you is that you lost yourself in the process, that your worth was tied to how he saw you, and now that he's gone, you're invisible. But that's not the truth. You were never lost. You were simply buried beneath layers of longing, compromise, and emotional exhaustion. Reclaiming your narrative means peeling those layers away and remembering the version of yourself that was always there. The version that didn't shrink for anyone, didn't wait for permission to be whole, and didn't confuse love with self-abandonment. You reclaim your narrative by speaking differently about yourself, by catching the inner critic mid-sentence and replacing shame with compassion, by telling the truth without romanticizing the pain, by stopping the sentence that starts with, "He made me feel," and replacing it with, "I learned to." It's not about erasing the past, it's about giving yourself the pen again. It is reminding yourself that you are not just a character in someone else's story. You are the narrator, the editor, and the author of your own. So write yourself back into your life, not as a victim, but as a survivor. Not as the girl he left, but as the woman who returned to herself. Speak about your past with honesty, but don't let it overshadow your future. Because when you reclaim your narrative, you don't just heal, you rewrite the ending. You decide who you are, what you carry forward, and what no longer gets to take up space. You stop waiting for someone to give you closure and realize that you are the key all along. There's a moment after heartbreak when the world feels frozen. Every corner of your routine echoes with his absence. His name lingers in your playlists, your favorite places, your memories. You find yourself replaying what was, holding on to fragments like they're sacred artifacts. But slowly, painfully, you come to realize that healing doesn't mean returning to who you were with him. It means creating a life he can no longer walk into, a life where his name no longer echoes, a life he no longer fits. Not out of bitterness, but because you simply outgrown the version of yourself that included him. Living a life he's no longer part of isn't about pretending he never existed. It's about refusing to live in the shadow of what he broke. It's the conscious decision to stop orbiting around a ghost. It means rebuilding your days one by one without referencing him as your emotional compass. You stop checking if he's watching, wondering if he regrets it, or hoping he notices your glow up. Because the point isn't for him to see it. The point is that you finally see yourself fully, without needing to be seen by him. You begin to reclaim your mornings. Maybe you sleep a little longer now. Maybe you get up earlier to run, read, or simply sit in silence. But these new rhythms are yours. You find new coffee spots where his memory doesn't follow you. You redecorate your space, change your route to work, even throw out the hoodie you used to borrow from him. These are small things, but they matter because they are proof that your life is evolving into something that has nothing to do with his choices anymore. You're curating a world where he no longer has a seat. And in that world, you rediscover joy that isn't tied to him. You laugh louder, dream bigger, and take up space in ways you never dared to when you were busy trying to be enough for someone who didn't know how to hold you. You travel without thinking about how to explain it to him. You meet people who don't know your pain and don't define you by it. You become so immersed in your own growth that the past becomes just that. Not because it didn't shape you, but because it no longer controls you. You stop performing for the possibility that he might look back. You stop building the future on the hope that he might walk into it again. Instead, you build one that's entirely yours. A future where your plans aren't filtered through someone else's indecision, where your peace isn't threatened by someone else's presence, where your worth isn't up for debate. He's not the prize anymore. Your peace is, your freedom is, your evolution is. That is what you wake up for now. There will still be moments, flashbacks, quiet aches, dreams that leave you disoriented. That's okay. Healing isn't linear, and your past doesn't disappear just because you've moved forward. But now, instead of letting those moments pull you back into pain, you let them remind you of how far you've come. You're not the same woman who cried in her car, who questioned her worth, who waited for a reply that never came. You're becoming someone he would no longer recognize, not because you've changed for him, but because you've evolved for yourself. Living a life he's no longer part of is the most radical form of self-love. It's choosing peace over longing, growth over grief, reality over fantasy. It's no longer begging the past to return in a better version, but choosing to move forward into something entirely new. And in doing so, you don't just heal, you thrive. You become untouchable in all the right ways. Not harder, but wiser. Not colder, but not detached, but finally free. There's a deep and aching emptiness that often follows heartbreak, the space where his love used to live. You replay the words he said, the way he held you, the things he promised. You measure your worth by how fully he once saw you and how suddenly he stopped. But here's the truth. No one tells you in those quiet moments. The love you gave him, the way you showed up, the softness, the sacrifice, that love was never meant to disappear when he walked away. It was meant to come back to you. And this time, not in fragments, this time whole. Loving yourself harder than he ever could is about replacing his affection. It's about realizing his love was never the standard. You were never supposed to shrink, beg, or compromise your boundaries just to feel worthy of being held. If he couldn't love you in the depth of your truth, it was never your failure, it was his limitation. So now, you take that same love you once gave away so freely, and you pour it back into yourself, not out of spite, out of reclamation, because you deserve a love that stays. And it starts with you. You start showing up for yourself in ways he never did. You speak to yourself with softness instead of criticism. You stop apologizing for needing rest, for taking space, for saying no. You begin to nourish your body not to fit a mold he once liked, but because you finally understand your body carries your spirit. You start building a relationship with yourself rooted in respect, not pressure. And day by day, you begin to trust that the love you were waiting for was never outside of you. It was always waiting within. You begin to invest in your own joy, not performative joy, not the kind you post hoping he'll see, but the kind that fills your lungs with laughter when you're alone in your room. The kind that comes from pursuing your goals, finding your purpose, dancing to your favorite songs, and falling in love with the small details of your life. You stop living in reaction to him and start living in devotion to you. Your love becomes your liberation, not your loneliness. And then something shifts. You no longer crave the validation that used to sustain you. You no longer wonder if he thinks about you because you're too busy thinking about who you're becoming. You begin to understand that the deepest love isn't loud or dramatic. It's consistent, honest, and rooted in truth. It's waking up and choosing yourself every single day, even when the world doesn't clap for it. It's becoming so full within that no one else's absence can empty you again. Loving yourself harder means forgiving yourself for the times you abandon your needs just to keep him close. It means recognizing your past choices with compassion instead of regret. You begin to see that you were never unlovable, you were simply misaligned. And now you build a relationship with yourself that no longer tolerates confusion, half love, or emotional crumbs. You realize you were never asking for too much, you were just asking the wrong person. And now you give it all to you without delay, without doubt. You don't need to prove your worth by how fast you move on or who notices your transformation. Your worth is proven every time you choose to show up for yourself. In a world that taught you to wait for someone else to do it, you are the love story. You are the main character. And when you love yourself harder than he ever could, you begin to write a story that no heartbreak can undo. A story where you are never left behind again, not even by yourself. So let this be the season you stop mourning the version of you that needed him. Let this be the chapter where you no longer beg for closure from someone who never deserved access to your soul in the first place. You don't need to break his heart to prove your power. You break his ego simply by healing, by glowing, by living fully in a life where his name no longer echoes. Let him become a footnote in your story, not the headline. Let your transformation be the loudest silence he ever hears. You are not the broken girl he left behind. You are the woman who rose from the ashes of what he couldn't value. The one who turned pain into power, wounds into wisdom, and heartbreak into rebirth. The truth is, he was never the prize. You were. You are. And now you walk forward, not to prove him wrong, but to prove to yourself that you were never meant to be loved in pieces. You were meant to be loved whole by you first and always.